Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Should marijuana be legal? That's the question at the center of our week-long special, America's High, the case for and against pot. We've interviewed Melissa Etheridge, who said she used medical marijuana after her diagnosis of breast cancer. We've also taken you on a raid at a national forest where Mexican drug cartels are planting marijuana gardens. As the battle rages, marijuana keeps entering this country. This week, Border Patrol agents in California found nearly 200 pounds of pot hidden in 2 vehicles. These pictures from that seizure. Arrests were made in both instances. There are places right here in America, though, where it's perfectly okay to own and smoke pot. And tonight, you're going to meet a legal pusher of the drug who believes it can help sick people. Joe Johns reports.
If marijuana has a future as a legitimate business in this country, Paul Stanford of Portland is a true pot pioneer.
I feel a little bit more relaxed. I can feel that I've had a couple of little puffs here.
Call it his Oregon Trail. For 25 years, he's pushed to legalize marijuana. In fact, for the last decade, he's hosted a cable access show on it.
Bring out our infamous dancing cannabis leaves.
He founded what he says was the first medical marijuana consultation and referral service in Oregon. The company has amassed files on 64,000 patients in 8 states where medical marijuana is legal, matching people who want it to doctors who can provide it. Stanford says it's a $3 million a year business. These plants are also Stanford's. He's licensed by the state to grow them for medical marijuana. He gives it away in closed-door meetings like this. The next frontier for this pioneer?
We need to take this market out of the hands of the kids and substance abusers who control it today and put it in the hands of the state, where the age limit's strictly enforced and where we can get tax revenue.
He's trying to get an initiative on the ballot here in Oregon that would allow for state taxation and regulation of marijuana, but he's failed in past efforts to legalize it here.
It doesn't cost much to raise these plants. The whole operation runs on a shoestring, basically. But if this were scaled out so that marijuana was being sold all over the country and it were legalized, there are some people who say the cost to society would be much greater than the benefit.
It's a guessing game, but a moderate estimate says if marijuana were decriminalized, it would save about $13 billion from not having to enforce marijuana laws. And if pot were taxed like alcohol and cigarettes, it would mean about $7 billion, a net gain for government of $20 billion.
But that's not a complete picture. Comparing alcohol to pot, one professor at USC said alcohol taxes only cover about 10% of alcohol-related costs like drunk driving, and tobacco taxes only cover about 20% of tobacco-related medical costs.
So what about marijuana? If legalized, would we see more accidents or lower worker productivity? And what about health effects, higher insurance rates? In Paul Stanford's garden, it's all blue sky.
That's assuming that marijuana is like alcohol and tobacco, and it isn't. Marijuana is a healthy alternative and much safer than alcohol and tobacco.
But what about the cartels and the brutal international drug trade? Those who support legalization say it will stem the violence. But critics say the cartels will simply slash their prices or ramp up trade in other drugs like cocaine or methamphetamine.
Stanford says there's no proof that would happen, and he remains confident in the mantra of legalization.
Marijuana is a lot safer than alcohol, has a lot of medicinal benefit, and so if we look at the science, we're going to win.
But given the national experience with legalized recreational drugs, who knows where this Oregon Trail will lead? Joe Johns, CNN, Portland.
Before the break, we introduced you to a man in Oregon, a pot pioneer of sorts, who believes that science shows marijuana has health benefits. Does it? One doctor we spoke to this week calls pot the best medication he's ever worked with. Others say it's a potent, addictive, gateway drug with dangerous side effects that ruins lives and families. Both sides have studies to prove their case. So what exactly are the facts? Let's try to get some answers. From 360 MD, Dr. Sanjay Gupta joins us now. Sanjay, let's get at it. Are there benefits to medical marijuana? I mean, is there a case for its use? Because the patients we talk to swear by it.
Yeah, well, the answer is yes. I mean, there are some medical benefits to marijuana, and this is more than just anecdotal evidence now, Anderson. There are some studies to sort of back that up. We know that there are receptors in the brain cannabinoid receptors, and they control things like your pain levels, your hunger levels, things related to your mood. And therein lies some of the possible benefits medically of marijuana. For example, someone who's having terrible malnourishment or terrible nausea as a result of chemotherapy or being infected with HIV/AIDS, using marijuana could stimulate appetite. Neuropathic pain, Anderson, is something I deal with quite a bit as a neurosurgeon. It's that lancinating nerve pain that is often caused by trauma or some sort of injury or surgery. Sometimes it can be very refractory to pain medications. Marijuana can help there as well. Multiple sclerosis, something else that I treat, that's something that causes significant tremors, for example. Marijuana can help. But the caveat, Anderson, is that sometimes other medications, which we know more about, may be better alternatives. So it can help, but there might be other things that even better.
Is there medical evidence that it can be dangerous? I mean, what do doctors say?
Well, most of the studies on this really look at some of the shorter-term effects of marijuana. It is hard to make the statement right now about the longer-term dangers of marijuana. The medical community as a whole, for example, the American Medical Association, is against the smoking of marijuana. I mean, that is a stance that they take as an organized medical association. But there are several areas in the brain, again, that marijuana affects. The hippocampus, Anderson, is an area that's responsible for memory. So short-term memory problems is something that is often cited. Also, the developing brain. Does it have somehow a greater impact on the developing brain? There are studies on this, although, as I looked through them today even, not conclusive. It's a real concern. There's also, this idea that you talk about THC, the active ingredient that Joe Johns was talking about, a lot of the other pieces this week, but there are 300 other compounds or so as well. And what exactly do they do? And finally, this issue that you raised, Anderson, about addiction. Is it addictive? You're going to find conflicting studies, not an exact number, but anywhere between 5 and 9% of people who smoke marijuana regularly could become addicted. Take a look there as compared to other substances. Tobacco, 31%, heroin, 23%, cocaine, 17%. You can see the numbers there, and you have cannabis at the bottom, 9%. So there is that risk as well, Anderson.
Because, I mean, a lot of the people, like Melissa Etheridge, I said the addictive question, and she basically just laughed and said, look, absolutely not. There's no way it's physically addictive. Other people say, well, maybe psychologically it has some addictive. I mean, does one make a difference between possible psychological addiction and physical addiction?
That's a great question. And when you talk about addiction, typically from a medical standpoint, you are talking about some sort of physical addiction. So the body changes in some way. It could be a mood-related thing, but associated with that mood, you may have, some sort of physical manifestations of the withdrawal. So there are criteria for withdrawal.
We got a text question I want to get to. Matthew from New Mexico asked, can we not obtain the medical benefits of marijuana without smoking it? So how about that? I mean, there is this federally approved drug on the market, Marinol, that treats the same symptoms that medical marijuana does. Some people say it doesn't work fast enough. Yeah. Is Marinol just not a decent substitute?
I don't think we're there yet. It's a synthetic form of THC. So the advantage, you get rid of a lot of those other compounds that we don't know a lot about. One of the disadvantages you just mentioned, it's a pill, so it may not work fast enough. One thing about using marijuana, either smoking it or vaporizing it, is you can titrate it a little bit more easily, so you can get the appropriate dose. With the pill, you may take too much or too little. It's a little bit harder to titrate.
All right, interesting information, good facts. Sanjay Gupta, appreciate it. Thanks, Sanjay.
Thanks, Anderson.
Tomorrow, Special on Pot continues a stunning report on how the collapse of the housing market may be fueling the growth of marijuana. Here's a preview.
A 3-bedroom ranch, a cut lawn, a family of 3, and a $500,000 a year illegal business in just one room.
This is what could only be described as a pot factory in a garage on a suburban street in Miami. Look at just the water system that brings the water to every individual plant that's in one of these pots. And these plants, 7 feet tall, just all in a garage that you would not notice from the street.
Fascinating.
A study out today found a new treatment for epilepsy is showing great promise. It uses an extract of marijuana. Here's Dr. John LaPook.
You're going to go to school.
From age 1, Hank Kovach suffered from severe epilepsy that could not be controlled with medicine. His mother, Megan, says in one day he could have more than 25 seizures.
I thought he was playing in the other room. He was not playing in the other room. He was convulsing, turning blue, and that's when I thought I lost him.
He's been such a good boy getting him all hooked up.
Last summer, she eagerly enrolled her son in a small trial designed to see if medical marijuana could help. Twice a day, Hank receives a marijuana liquid extract called Epidiolex. The medicine does not contain THC, the ingredient that can cause euphoria, anxiety, and paranoia. Megan says the change has been dramatic.
We instantly saw results. He was smiling again. We noticed the decrease in seizures. He was able to transition. And at this point, he was finally able to gain cognitive skills.
137 children and young adults, average age 11, were given the drug. After 12 weeks, parents reported the number of seizures declined 45 to 50%. Dr. Linda Locks of Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago is one of the researchers.
Some of the kids clearly became more verbal, better coordination. I had one child who started walking while they were using the medications.
Where's Harold the helicopter?
Hank's epilepsy was so severe, at age 7, he still cannot speak. But he's able to attend school and has not had a seizure in months.
My goal for him is to hear his voice, to hear him talk. We just want him to be happy.
It's been known since the early 70s that the active ingredient Hank received, called cannabidiol, can block seizures in animals. But how it works is unclear. What is clear, Scott, that much more research is needed, especially placebo-controlled trials.
Promising news. John, thanks for that.
I was just superficially aware of it.
I had no knowledge at all of it, I would say.
I'm interested in medical marijuana.
What I'm going to do. How about we pass a resolution? That's not a bad solution.
I'm Robert Platshorn, and I'm the founder of the Silver Tour and the man who spent more time in prison for marijuana, a nonviolent offense, than anyone in the history of America. I was in federal prison for 30 years for smuggling marijuana. When I got out of prison, the last thing in the world I expected to do was become an activist.
Tax medical marijuana.
Nobody speaks to seniors. When Prop 19 was defeated in California, I looked at the exit polls and I saw that seniors voted 65% against. That's my generation. We invented marijuana as it's known today. I mean, we were Woodstock. The list is so long of things that can be treated with cannabis. People with arthritis, people who have trouble sleeping, who would like to be able to smoke a joint and go to sleep. There's a medicine that can't do you any harm. No one has ever died from marijuana. The savings to the taxpayer, to the drug user, to the insurance companies is billions upon trillions of dollars.
I learned today that many of my friends who have disabilities and are incapacitated can benefit from medical marijuana.
Please, let me sign a letter to my congressman. I'm old. I can't wait. We need this stuff now. And how come you didn't bring samples?
I'd like to try it. I would really like to. I have many medical problems. I don't like the fact that you have to smoke it. If I could take it in a pill or some other way, chocolate candy.
I have requests from every state in the union to bring the Silver Tour. And when we can find enough sponsors, that's what we're going to be doing. All we really have to do is allay their fears. We don't have to sell medical marijuana. These guys smoked it back then. They know that it's pretty good. And if you can go to bed with a smile, you're so much better off.
A mother from the small city of Madison, Minnesota, faces possible prison time this morning for giving her teenage son medical marijuana. He has a traumatic brain injury. Angela Brown says she turned to the treatment as a last resort, unable to watch her son suffer any longer. Adriana Diaz sat down with a family that could be split up by the law. Adriana, good morning.
Good morning. Angela Brown traveled to Colorado to get a bottle of cannabis oil in hopes of bringing some comfort to her son. But what she calls a mother's instinct may land her behind bars.
I broke the law, but I did it to save my son.
For years, Angela Brown searched for a way to end her son's chronic pain. 15-year-old Trey Brown looks healthy, but pressure inside his head causes this. Pain stemming from a baseball accident in 2011.
Where were you standing when you got hit?
It's like right over there.
A line drive to Trey's head caused bleeding in an area of his brain the size of a golf ball. Doctors feared he wouldn't survive. But when he finally woke up from a medically induced coma, his mother says the old Trey was gone.
Who is he now?
He's just a shell of himself, but he's in so much pain, and that causes depression.
With depression came daily migraines, muscle spasms, and uncontrollable outbursts like this one.
Oh, please don't hit him. Don't hit him.
I cry like every day before I go to bed. I'll end up crying.
What does it feel like?
Like my brain is like about to blow up.
Hoping to ease his pain, Trey's parents tried 18 different medications, but little helped. Angela believes some of the drug's side effects even made Trey suicidal.
He told me, Mom, I don't want to live. I can't do this anymore.
And what is going through your mind when you're hearing your child say these words to you?
This is not fair. It's not fair. I have been so angry. I begged him. I said, we will find an answer.
Desperate, she began researching the benefits of medical marijuana. The family drove to Colorado and obtained this bottle of cannabis oil. Legal there, but not in Minnesota. Angela says after a few drops, Trey's pain melted away.
Did you think it was a miracle?
Yeah, oh God, yeah. It was a miracle in a bottle.
It stopped the pain, and it stopped the muscle spasms. It was like helping me go to school until it got taken away, and then school was really hard again.
Taken away when Trey's teachers asked why he was doing better in school.
I said, well, I gave him an oil that we had gotten from Colorado, derived from the marijuana plant, and then you could feel the tension in the room.
A week later, the sheriff's department confiscated the oil, and county prosecutors charged Angela with child endangerment and requiring child protection. If convicted, she could face up to 2 years in prison and $6,000 in fines.
I was trying to prevent him from being hurt.
But you did get an illegal substance
Yes.
and give it to him.
Illegal substance in Minnesota, not illegal in other states.
CBS News reached out to the county prosecutor, law enforcement, and Trey's school district. All declined our requests for an interview, citing the ongoing case. If Angela does go to jail, she fears most for her children.
Who would take care of my kids? My boys or Mama's boys?
They need you?
Yeah, I guess, yeah. I need them. I need them.
In May, Minnesota did become the 22nd state to approve medical marijuana, but the law doesn't go into effect until next year, and the Brand family says they simply can't wait.
I'm so glad you did this story. I'm hoping that people will look at it and say, come on. You know, at some point, common sense has to prevail. They're clearly not abusing the system, and it's helping her son.
Yeah. They say they actually want to move to Colorado once this is all resolved, but whether or not the mother will join the family has yet to be seen.
Wow. Adriana, thank you so much.
Ole Miss is home to many things, including the only legally grown marijuana crop in our nation. And a new development there is creating quite a buzz tonight. Faculty and student researchers say they've created a new pain reliever in the form of a patch. Action News 5's Janice Broach joins us now with the story you'll see only on Fox.
This here, just touching the smell, it's a wonderful smell.
Dr. Mahmoud El-Soli is a faculty member at the School of Pharmacy at Ole Miss. He and his team have been working inside this lab for nearly 7 years to find alternative uses for THC, the main psychoactive ingredient in marijuana.
The plant itself has a great potential for good medicines coming out of the cannabis plant, but certainly not in smoking of the drug.
You heard him. He is not a fan of legalizing pot, but he is a fan of his newest creation, a pot pain reliever in the form of a patch that is placed over the gum line in patients who have problems taking the drug in pill form.
In addition to pain, it will include things like reducing the intraocular pressure, and therefore will be good for glaucoma, will be good for alleviating the nausea and vomiting associated with chemotherapy, will also be good for appetite stimulation.
Formulas were first screened in rabbits, then pigs. Dr. El-Soli believes the right formula will lead to testing in humans.
So we're not really introducing anything strange to the body other than the THC itself. We're just having to make it so that we make it possible to be absorbed through the mucosa.
More than 77,000 samples were prepared for analysis on this project. Early tests show the patch can work for up to 10 hours.
Because of the way it's absorbed, it's almost like absorbed from the lungs, like the smoke. When you smoke, it goes from the lungs to the whole entire body before going to the liver. Unlike the oral, it goes to the liver first and then goes to the rest of the body.
The patch grew out of earlier experiments Dr. El Soli says didn't go over so well. He first tried making a pot suppository.
Jay Leno was, had it on his show when we first came up with the product and say, that researcher at Ole Miss has developed a way to administer, marijuana by suppository. You know how he came up with this idea? They said, how? And he said, well, he was smoking a joint, and then he saw the cups, and he went.
Janice Broach, Action News 5.
All right. Ole Miss has not used its outdoor marijuana field since the year 2007. Instead, everything is grown in a lab, which is under 24-hour surveillance by the DEA. Research on the pot patch got its kickstart thanks to a national grant. You can learn more about it at WMCTV.com. Ursula.
Its name is THC, and it was discovered back in 1964 in a lab in Jerusalem by chemist Raphael Meshulam.
Cannabis had not been well investigated, which was strange. After all, it was being used illegally or illegally by millions of people, and yet we didn't know that much about it. So I thought it's a good idea to look at it again from a modern point of view.
In the lab, Meshulam and his colleagues broke cannabis down and zeroed in on the chemical components that might be causing its effects.
We isolated about 10 compounds. Surprisingly, out of the 10 compounds we isolated, only one, which now is known as delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol, in short THC, only one causes the well-known high. We tested it in humans, many of my friends, and we saw that the compound is effective as we expected it to be.
The identification of THC answered one question, but raised another. Just what did it do to the brain?
I had always assumed that people knew how marijuana worked. It surprised me, actually, when I began looking in the research literature that it was really clear that no one really knew how it worked.
In 1988, Lynn Howlett found the answer. She discovered that deep inside the brain, THC molecules activate a previously unknown network of specialized chemical receptors.
So that was proof that there is a receptor protein in the brain that can bind to the THC like a key in a lock.
It was very exciting because what that meant to us was we had a tool that could be used for studying, and other researchers could use it as well. And people could study where the receptor was in the brain.
Howlett and other scientists found the receptors in the hippocampus, which forms memories, the cerebellum, which controls movement, and the frontal cortex, where we think.
Here were these receptors that this chemical produced by a plant out in the world just so happened to have the precise combination to unlock. What an extraordinary thing that is. Is that why that receptor network existed, so that people could get high?
We don't have those receptors just so that people can get high smoking pot. Receptors are developed in neurons so that they can communicate with a chemical that the body makes.
So that was the logic behind going in and trying to extract a compound in the brain that would act just like marijuana did.
And in 1992, proof came that the brain does make a compound very much like THC. It was discovered by none other than Raphael Meshulam, who named it anandamide.
We call it the brain's own marijuana because the compound that is made by the brain, anandamide, shares all the properties in terms of at the receptor level and cellular level that THC has.
It turns out that when anandamide is released in the brain, like marijuana, it affects such basic things as appetite, pain, and memory. and it plays a critical role in a sometimes underappreciated mental function, forgetting.
When I first heard that, it didn't seem adaptive to me to have a drug for forgetting. Memory, we understand, has great survival utility. You learn that that's a poisonous mushroom or that's a dangerous animal, and you stay away and you remember that. But why would forgetting be adaptive? And I asked Meshulam this question, and he said, well, tell me, do you really want to remember all the faces you saw on the subway this morning? Forgetting well is almost as important as remembering well. Forgetting is about editing. It's about taking the flood, the ocean of sense information coming at you and forgetting everything but what's important. So life is not just about accumulating new memories. Memory can cripple us too. You have soldiers returning from war zones that are traumatized by experiences that, in effect, they can't unlearn. So if you could help them unlearn that, essentially a productive kind of forgetting, either with a drug or some other kind of regime, that would be incredibly useful.
Dozens of major studies have been published in the last few years that indicate that the chemicals in cannabis, in the lab and in animals, have a significant effect on fighting almost all major cancers, including brain, breast, prostate, lung, thyroid, colon, skin, pituitary, melanoma, and leukemia cancers. They do this by promoting the death of cancer cells that have forgotten how to die, as well as a reduction in their crucial blood supply, while leaving healthy cells untouched. But why, you may wonder, would cannabis have any effect on cancer? The answer can be explained in one word: endocannabinoids. Amazing as it sounds, we're all born with a form of cannabis already in our bodies. It's called the endocannabinoid system. The endocannabinoid system, or ECS, influences multiple physiological processes. This intricate system modulates energy intake as well as nutrient transport, metabolism, and storage. A completely natural collection of compounds, endocannabinoids are our body's own form of marijuana and are involved in most of our cells and structures. They control a variety of functions in the nervous system, heart, reproductive, and immune systems. Endocannabinoid messengers help the cells communicate. Typically, they protect our good cells while killing the bad ones, like cancer cells. In all animals, the nervous system is made of the same components, large numbers of nerve cells carrying electrical signals. And wherever the cells meet, these signals are passed to a receptor in the next cell by a chemical messenger called a neurotransmitter. Inside the brain, there are different types of neurotransmitters, including dopamine and serotonin. All animals, from rodents to fish to elephants to humans, have inherited this basic structure. But hundreds of millions of years ago, the sea squirt and other primitive invertebrates evolved an innovation to this system.
What happened was the nervous system acquired a new chemical, if you like, that had a new flavor, a new type of chemical. And it's this chemical that is related in structure, has a similar shape to the chemical that's found in cannabis.
Because of this similarity, these new signals came to be known as cannabinoids. It was inevitable that eventually cannabis would meet its perfect partner: us. Whether you like it or not, each and every one of us is fundamentally wired to respond to cannabis.
Now, receptors are not built in our brain or anywhere in our body, of course, or animal bodies, because there is a plant out there that will produce a compound that acts on them. That just doesn't work that way. Receptors are found in our body because we produce compound that will activate those receptors. So obviously we thought that there should be endogenous compounds which act on those receptors. The fact that there is a plant compound, a tetrahydrocannabinol, a THC, which acts on those receptors is just a quirk of nature.
After scientists discovered THC, they found that it could bind to specific receptors in the brain and the area around it, and that this interaction created a cascade of biological processes leading to the well-known high.
What does it feel like? It looks very enjoyable.
My God, it's fun. It was amazing. Amazing.
If you block the endocannabinoids artificially in mice, they tend to grow tumors, and they also get depressed. A few years ago, some brilliant entrepreneurs came up with the idea of blocking the endocannabinoids in our body to create a new diet drug. The theory being, if cannabis gives people the munchies, then blocking the endocannabinoids would make them lose their appetites. The drug they developed, Rimonabant, did indeed reduce appetite by blocking the endocannabinoid receptors. But data from clinical trials showed that Rimonabant users suffered depression, anxiety, insomnia, and aggressive impulses at twice the rate of subjects given a placebo.
Well, Sanofi-Aventis, the company that had developed and was marketing this agent, did not study people with a history of psychiatric illness or depression before they applied for approval. That was probably a mistake. The EMA did approve it, and the drug's been on the market in Europe for a year and a half by now. And I've sort of said, if there was any real problem with this that was more than just theoretical, we would know. Well, it turns out we do know. And they've suggested now that the risk for this agent outweighs the benefit.
In one study, there were 5 suicides among Rimonabant users because, as they discovered, endocannabinoids are also mood regulators with the capacity to make us feel euphoric or, when blocked, depressed. Rimonabant was finally withdrawn from the market in 2008. Researchers at the MD Anderson Cancer Center in Texas reported that mice on Rimonabant developed potentially cancerous polyps at a far higher rate than controls, confirming that endocannabinoids are not only mood regulators, but tumor regulators as well.
My good Italian friend Di Maso summarized the activity, which is really a summary, says, well, what do the endocannabinoids do? They relax, help us eat, sleep, forget, and protect. Not remember, forget. And don't think that forgetting is less important than recalling. We should have a system to forget. Otherwise, well, if you wish, we can burst. If you go down a mall and see 1,000 faces, do you want to remember all of them? Of course not.
We roughly estimate that about a third of the people are receiving letters of recommendation and approval for primarily emotional or mental problems, and that cannabis is a unique psychotropic in this context, in that it has effects on both cognition and affect that also are inextricably connected with different kinds of physical functioning. For example, with anorexia, people get inadequate nutrition because of their anxiety causing suppression of the appetite, and that when they receive cannabis, the nutrition is improved because the peristalsis and the spasm is relieved, peristalsis is promoted, so also evacuation, which then produces improved mood and improved functioning. With regard to cognition, this also includes people with thought disorders, and you might find this kind of unusual, but there are certain aspects of cognitive functioning that cannabis helps, like suppressing or decreasing obsessive thinking, and also paranoid ideation and paranoid delusional thought. Interestingly, the short-term memory loss that people experience when they acutely medicate with usually inhaled cannabis, they can't hold a paranoid delusion long enough. And the same goes for obsessive compulsive disorder, because they can't keep up this string of pathologic associations. Also, the modulation of affect also affects the cognitive behavior. With decreased anxiety, this decreases the pressure for this abnormal type of thought. I believe that a new category is warranted that cannabis fits, and that's easement. If you look that up in the dictionary, you'll see several meanings. And one of the main meanings is giving ease, not the property legalistic kind of passage or going on to some property and getting certain rights, but easement as a calming effect. And this is what I believe cannabis more closely approximates. It's not the same as a benzodiazepine, which produces sedation and, ironically, depression. There is no free lunch pharmacologically. So people do not like the benzodiazepines and other sedatives for these kinds of reasons, and cannabis helps restore emotional responsivity in a normal way. And this also goes along with people with their paranoid ideation and disturbance of interpersonal relationships. With certain people with thought disorder, they note that they're more able to relate to others, which then improves their self-esteem and their social functioning. You're never going to find this written anywhere because of the psychiatric literature being horribly biased. And I've looked through the APA publications going back maybe 70 years, and it all is tainted with the antisocial element and calling it dysfunctionality or character defect or other kinds of pejorative, condemnatory terms. And it's all pill pushing. It's all medication. And to that end, we really don't know what is happening, and this extends not just to psychotropics, but I'm going to read you a short letter to John A. Kitzhaber, MD, Director, Center for Evidence-Based Policy, Oregon Health and Science University. And this is who I suggest if you want to contact to embarrass a little bit. On February 25th, I happened to view a panel presentation by your organization on C-SPAN on the cost-benefit study of different pharmaceuticals contracted by AARP. The sum total of that panel was they could not develop any cost-benefits analyses because in analyzing the pharmaceutical literature, they discovered it was all promotional rather than objective and scientific. So everything masquerading as science is not. So based upon California clinical experience with a range of chronic conditions, our findings indicate a significant advantage over other pharmaceuticals conventionally utilized because of improved quality of life and fewer adverse effects. Consequently, we request the opportunity to discuss our findings with you. Attached is a list of conditions. And guess what the response was? So I'm glad this is going over cable TV in the Portland area, and hopefully somebody out there in the viewing audience can can give the center a call and ask them to include cannabis in their studies, and especially about the mental health issue. I would be fascinated to hear the response, but I won't hold my breath.
May I interject just very briefly? There's research I'm sure you guys are all aware of about the synergistic effects of the receptor effects of opiates and cannabinoids, where they basically are hitchhiking with each other, and much smaller doses of both medications create the same benefit with, of course, much less side effects. These are really remarkable findings, and I really regret that there aren't physicians who are just monitoring the reduction in the prescription patterns of their patients if they doubt that cannabis is useful.
You think that's new? If you read marijuana medical papers, in the Ohio State Medical Society meeting on cannabis in 1860, a Dr. Frommuller from Ohio reported that using an alternating courses of opiates and cannabis for treating chronic conditions reduced dependence on opiates. 1859 this was written. And so, you know, this is something new. No, we're talking about the takeover by Big Farm and ruining policy through their special interest money. And furthermore, the fact that this whole system, can I use my favorite phrase?
Why not?
Monomolecular mercantile madness. This is all patent office driven. If you look back to what it was before the single molecule ascended to its role in current commercial medicine, you'll see that it's all secondary to what can get patented. And then they claim that the newly patented material is increasingly better, blah, 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 but then you see what's happened to the literature. It's gotten thoroughly corrupted and perverted so that you don't know what's happening. And here we have now a drug-seeking, drug-hungering public convinced that they need all sorts of combinations of patentable materials. And it's really sickening our society. And when they started directly advertising to the public, for psychotropics especially, ask your doctor. Social anxiety disorder, all these kinds of influences to influence you and their bottom line.
Any other questions?
When I'm watching the Super Bowl and I see that they're saying people like me are, in addition to like mowing the lawn and having some nachos, also murdered a family in Colombia, I take offense to that. Who else takes offense to that? I did not murder a family in Colombia, and it is the people that are propagating this that are responsible, and they're going to keep on. They're going to be. I can't even imagine how many families are going to die because of our drug war in Colombia.
War on drugs? Give me a break, man. Attention, drug war generals out there. We are fighting back, man. And unlike you drug war generals, we are non-violent. We are peaceful. You cannot and will not stop us because we are not criminals. We are Americans. We're going to make that mean something. And we're about to take our country back and put it in the hands of the people who founded this country. The hands of the people whose blood and sweat and tears and backs paved the way for us to be here today. The problem is that in our justice system, we've got too much emphasis on the system and not enough emphasis on the justice. And that ain't gonna make it, man. That's exactly why we're here today at Seattle Hemp Fest. That's why you came out, and we'll be vocal day after day after day, year after year after year until we've overcome and justice finally prevails.
You also testified before the DEA in 1988.
I did indeed.
And now, what came from that, and who did you speak with when you were
Oh, I testified in front of a Judge Francis Young, very intelligent man. And the feeling of the people that I was working with, normal, and he was going to brush it off.
Okay.
We were going to finish our testimony, and 15 minutes later he was going to say, forget it. He didn't do that. He agonized over this for a long time. And he was only to make a recommendation to the head of DEA. He couldn't make the decision. And he recommended wholeheartedly. And he had heard people all over the United States from all different kinds of illnesses and said, in effect, for God's sakes, help these people.
And what kind of response did he receive?
The head of DEA, in effect, said drop dead.
Why do you think that is?
Because they're stupid.
Okay. Now, we only have a couple of minutes left, and I was wondering, you commented that people of an older generation than what I am have a problem at times being able to restructure their thinking on this plant. What do you have to say to them? Okay.
We were told, and I came from an era that if my government told me, go out and stand in the middle of the traffic, I'd probably do it, because they would never tell me anything that was harmful. And it has taken me a long time to realize this is no longer true. Maybe it never was, but I thought it was. And so therefore, it's difficult. It's like a religion. You may go away from the religion that you were brought up as a child, but it's always there. Oh, go with your gut feeling. If you think you're right, go for it.
Thank you very much.
Millions of farmers all over this country have been losing their farms at the rate of 1 million a year.
What, acreages or million farms?
Farmers. You know, at one time there was 8 million working farmers in this country, American family farmers. Now we're down to probably less than 2 million. The big corporations, it's the old story of the big ones eating the little ones. And they're running the small farmer off the land. And when that happens, the farm town closes down. The first thing, the hospitals and the schools go. And then what happens is all these people are now unemployed. They move on to the next big city, which causes the same kind of problems in that city. I think that all the homelessness, alcoholism, insanity, all these things that we experience, unemployment in our country, can be traced back to the first time that the first American farmer was forced off his land when he was unable to make a living off of 100 to 200 acres of land. And the reason for it is because they have asked him, demanded or made it necessary that he raise a crop below what it costs him to raise it. Okay. He loses money on, for instance, if he, just example figures, for instance, if he were to, it costs him $2 to, or $3 to plant and raise and harvest a bushel of corn, and if he only gets $2.50 for that at the market, then he's losing. Right. And this is an accepted practice in American agriculture today, for the farmer to get less than what it costs him to grow. And they keep trying to justify it with subsidies and whatever. But the American farmer would rather go out here and work hard and make his money the hard way, the way he knows how to do it. Give him an acre, let him do what that acre can do. Let him do it without all the pesticides, without all the chemicals. Don't put his yield so low, his money so low, that he has to use every piece or every gallon of pesticides that he can find to pour on that acre of land in order to get enough money out to almost break even. Mm-hmm. They have forced him into this position. There are even banks who will not loan you any money at all unless you agree to use X amount of pesticides and chemicals on your land.
Oh, really?
Absolutely. Because they know that the only way you can make your payment is if you get so much off of that acre, and the only way you can get that much off of that acre is to keep pouring the chemicals to that 1 acre.
Wow. What When did you first become aware of hemp as a cash crop?
A couple of years ago, I read a book I think that a lot of us have read by now called The Emperor Wears No Clothes, and it was in that book there was a reprint of an article. The one thing in that book that I saw that could not be argued with was an article that came out in a 1938 edition of Popular Mechanics magazine, February edition, if anybody wants to go check it out, that said a new billion-dollar crop for the farmers.
Do you think that farmers today would be receptive to growing hemp as a cash crop? Because of all the propaganda we've heard over the years, there are so many people now who believe that it's the evil weed. But we kind of figure it, because of all the products that it can create, that it could be a solution.
Well, definitely. I think most people that I talked to had no idea, just like me, that hemp and marijuana was the same thing. We were ignorant of that fact. Also, we were ignorant of the fact that hemp could be used as food. It can be used as clothing. The first Levi's in this country were made from hemp. The first Bibles were printed on hemp paper. The Declaration of Independence, the first 2 copies of this was printed on hemp paper. People don't know that.
Now, when you're out there working with the farmers side by side, do you have an opportunity to witness ways that we, people who are not involved with the farm communities on a daily basis, those of us who are driving to and from work and stuck in our offices, what can we do to help the farmer overcome this misery? They've been together as our backbone forever.
There's a great plan that just I became aware of it here a year or so ago, last year in fact. The farmers have come up with this idea themselves. It's called parity giving. For instance, if you're a rich guy, you got millions of dollars, you want to do something for the poor, the hungry people, you would buy direct from the farmers, pay them a certain price. For instance, for corn, if you buy $1 million worth of corn from the farmers and pay them $3 a bushel, whatever the market price is, then you would be able to write off, you give it to the hungry, you give it to the poor people. Then you would write off what is considered a parity price or a fair market price which would be in the neighborhood of around $7. So you would get to charge, you buy it for $3 and get to write off $7. So this would be a great benefit not only to the guy with money who wants to help, to the farmer who gets his product sold, and also to the people out there who are hungry, who needs the food. It's really ridiculous for people to be starving to death on this planet when there's a lot of food available.
My other organization is VOTE, Victory Over the Enemy.
Hey, I like that.
Which is the unregistered voter in the state of California.
Oh, okay.
What we have to do is upgrade our standard of voting. We can send people to the moon, and we're sending satellites into outer space. I believe that our system of voting in this country is very antiquated, very old. It needs to be renewed and revised and updated. I think that the voting should be more important than Christmas.
Okay.
I think that we should spend a lot of money on educating the people. Look at it this way. The government is in favor of the United States public to vote. I feel that it's our duty to show them or to find a way to help the government find ways to help people vote. And I think with television, the telephone, computer optics, and satellite dishes and all this technology that we've got, we should be able to sit home and vote on all these important issues. And I'm sure the government wants everybody to vote. It's our constitutional right, and they stand behind it. I think that they should get behind us and help us to get out there and make voting a very important issue. It is important, even if you're not in favor of, say, the California Marijuana Initiative or the Hemp Initiative, that's fine. We would love for you to come out and speak your opinion. We want you out there voting. We want you to take an active part in this country. If you do, then I think this will solve the problem.
This is Mr. Henry Ford in 1941 with Popular Mechanics magazine showing off his car made from hemp.
Well, come climb the mountain with me. Come see what we can see. Come climb the mountain with me, and then we will all be free. The Some men are born to lead, some men have destiny. Some men plant the seed, and some men set it free.
We had 92,000 cars a day, thousands of people parking behind the FBI building, and they arrested us and they said, you cannot do this. I said, well, I'm not going to pay you a fine and go on probation. So I did 15 days in prison rather than give them a $5 fine.
Wow,
You know, we had
that's kind of like telling Jesus you can't practice on Sunday.
It was a fine line.
So come climb the mountain with me, come see what we can see. Come climb the mountain with me, and then we will all be free.
Jack here and Ed Adair. Well, hi guys. They must be on the hemp tour. Are you on the hemp tour?
One man said we must hear. One man's voice was clear. One man heard the call. His vision speaks for all.
The number one plant for paper, fiber, and fuel from the natural cycle had been outlawed. That somehow the synthetic cycle had won, when the number one thing in the natural cycle could outproduce it and completely clean up the atmosphere. So my partner, Captain Ed, who had become my partner in 1973 and doing the politics of this, said, we have to teach everybody in the world. So we went around and told everybody. But it was a slow process.
So come open your eyes with me and come see what you can see. It's time for the world to know the emperor wears no clothes. Come open your eyes with me. It's time for you to see. It's time for the world to know the emperor wears no clothes. It's time for the world to know the emperor wears no clothes. The emperor wears no clothes. The emperor wears no clothes. The emperor wears no clothes.
Tune in next week. We'll have a tape show next week. Check out where I'll be at newwestsummit.com. And we want you to tune in and help us restore hemp.
Oh, deep water, black and cold like the night. I stand with arms wide open. I've run a twisted mile. I'm a stranger in the arms of the Maker. I could not see for the fog in my eyes.